Part 20. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 191. What's wrong with Teacher Ruolin? Why are you afraid of a young man? Haven't you heard? That young man seems to be an elder from the Sutra Pavilion. It's unbelievable that the black and white elders of the Sutra Pavilion would agree to someone joining. Haha, Canaan College is so big, it is inevitable that the two elders, black and white, need to develop their own power. Those students were talking to each other, and they obviously regarded Xian Chen as a subordinate of the black and white elders. But even for subordinates, they are definitely not something that students like them can easily compare to. Teacher Ruolin listened to the discussion of those people, frowned and asked Xian Chen, "Who are you? Why can you enter the Sutra Pavilion, and what is your purpose in impersonating Xian Chen? You must know that this student Xian Chen was admitted by me personally, so if you pretend to be in front of me, it would be a big mistake. Tell me. Did you kill Xian Chen?" Instructor Ruolin was furious and wanted to kill the guy in front of her who was pretending to be Xian Chen. However, Xian Chen smiled faintly, stretched out his hand to pinch Tutor Ruolin's chin, and said with a mischievous smile, "Teacher Ruolin really knows how to joke. Looking at the entire Dochi continent, I am the only one who dares to call myself Xian Chen. Who in the world dares to impersonate me, Xian Chen? But since you are so worried about me, how about you tell me where Xiao Suner is at the moment?" Xian Chen went back to playing and making fun, but when it came to Xiao Suner, he still talked seriously. "You said you are Xian Chen, but I don't believe you are." Teacher Ruolin can say so many things to others. Seeing that his goddess was being bullied, he almost cried. However, those students who had hidden dragons and crouching tigers couldn't bear it anymore and stood up one after another. One of the burly students shouted to Xian Chen, "Who are you? According to Teacher Ruolin, you seem to be pretending to be our junior brother." "Hey, junior brother Zhao, Xian Chen hasn't reported to our Canaan College yet, so for now, he doesn't belong to our sect yet. Regardless of whether there are reports or not, the one person that Teacher Ruolin cares about is my relative, Zhao Yueshan. It's a showdown. My grandfather is Zhao Shanhe, the Governor-General of Martial Lionheart of the Jiaji Empire." Zhao Shanhe. I didn't expect that junior brother Zhao has such a profound background. To be honest, junior brother Zhao, my brother's grandfather, is also the Governor-General of Martial Lionheart. Although he is the deputy, it does not affect the fact that we are brothers. Looking at these clown-like guys, Xian Chen just raised his palm, and a ball of golden flame immediately appeared. The moment the golden flame appeared, everyone's eyes became shocked. Teacher Ruolin looked at the golden flame and seemed to think of something. She hurriedly asked the other party, "Back in Wuyutan City, Xian Chen's flame was golden. Could it be that you are his senior brother?" Senior brother? After all, Xian Chen was really not interested in this kind of person who couldn't explain it for a while, so he continued to focus on her. "That's all, no matter who you are, since you can be appreciated by the black and white elders, you must have something special about yourself. But having said that, I still want to warn you. There are hidden dragons and crouching tigers in Canaan Academy. Don't get yourself into trouble just because you are arrogant." Instructor Ruolin seemed to be admonishing, but it was actually a warning. Xian Chen ignored the other party. He naturally didn't want to explain too much to such a stubborn woman. The moment Xian Chen left the academy class and stepped out of the room, a young girl with a good figure passed by him. At this moment, Xian Chen suddenly stopped and turned to look at the girl's back. Looking at this familiar figure, Xian Chen frowned and said, "Sister Suner? Is that you?" "Xian Chen." Xiao Suner suddenly turned around after hearing the voice she would never forget. However, when she saw an unfamiliar face, Xiao Suner turned around without hesitation. Seeing Xiao Suner leaving, Xian Chen immediately took steps and walked towards the location of the peaks. Looking at the young man walking in the air, The students all pointed fingers. Teacher Ruolin Xiao Suner noticed that Teacher Ruolin seemed to be frightened, and immediately walked quickly to her. Seeing that Xiao Suner was safe, he hurriedly held the other person's hand and said to Xiao Suner with a scared look on his face, "Really? Suner had a young man just now. He was pretending to be Xian Chen, but fortunately I got rid of him in time, otherwise, the consequences would be really unimaginable." Someone is pretending to be Xian Chen? How is this possible? Xiao Suner was puzzled. Xian Chen only stayed in Wuyuan City and never traveled far, so how could he appear here? What's more, it is even more impossible to know when a young man is from the mouth of Instructor Ruolin. Well, no matter what, you have to remember that if you encounter a bad person, you must tell your instructor in time so that the instructor can arrange someone to protect you. Haha, don't worry, Teacher Ruolin, Suner will naturally be protected. Xiao Suner smiled lightly, then walked back to her seat and sat down. After Xian Chen left, because Xiao Suner didn't recognize it was him, he immediately came to the back mountain where the academy was located alone. Standing on the top of the mountain, Xian Chen was drinking alone, when suddenly a figure quietly landed in mid-air. "You shouldn't come at this time." This man seemed to know Xian Chen, frowning at Xian Chen and asking. Xian Chen raised his eyes to look at the person coming, then threw out a jug of good wine, which was instantly picked up. Ling Ying took a sip and sat down. Watching Xian Chen drink by himself, Ling Ying continued to ask, "What have you experienced? Are you able to become a young man in such a short time? Or are you originally is it a young man who just took a miracle drug that can make him younger?" Ling Ying's fresh and refined inquiry made Xian Chen a little more interested. He looked Ling Ying up and down, and when he saw that he was still wearing the fiery red robe as before, he smiled lightly and said, "Yes, I took the miraculous elixir you mentioned, but what I didn't expect was, the person who could recognize me immediately was actually a man." Faced with Xian Chen's self-deprecation, Ling Ying glanced at the other party with disdain, and then explained, "You and I met before, and we were equally powerful at the time. We want to remember the aura of a strong man. For you and me, it's too simple, so it's not surprising to be able to tell who you are. But you can't blame Miss Suner. After all, in Miss Suner's heart, what she likes is Xian Chen who left half a year ago. But now that you have become like this, even I can't accept it for a while. No. What Ling Ying said is not unreasonable. Xiao Suner is not suitable to meet now." After hesitating for a moment, Ling Ying continued to Xian Chen, leave here, go to Zhongzhou, that is your stage. With your strength, you can already be called the overlord level here, but when you go over there, it's a different scenery." The young Do Huang Ling Ying told Xian Chen about the prosperity and power of Central Continent. It seems that mentioning Zhongzhou is an extremely enjoyable thing for Ling Ying. Xian Chen looked at the other party silently, maybe leaving would be the best outcome for him. After all, with his strength, it would indeed be childish to stay here. "If you have nowhere to go in Central Continent, you can tell me and I can ask the family to arrange a residence for you. I think with your strength as a fighting master, even the patriarch will be extremely happy." Ling Ying said to Su Chen, but Xian Chen frowned and remained silent. Seeing that Xian Chen didn't react the whole time, Ling Ying immediately walked to him, took out a jade tablet from the ring, and threw it into Xian Chen's arms. Inside. This is the jade medal of our Gu family. With it, you have a talisman. When you encounter some problems, relying on this jade medal can also help you resolve many crises. Xian Chen was flattered by Ling Ying's continued help. In terms of relationship, he and Ling Ying had no relationship at all, not even as friends. "Why are you so nice to me?" Xian Chen frowned, looking at Ling Ying's support and feeling a little incredible. Ling Ying smiled faintly and explained, "Golden scales are just things in the pond. They turn into dragons when encountering wind and clouds. Go to Xian Chen and pursue a tomorrow that only belongs to you." Listening to Ling Ying's words, Xian Chen was slightly touched. Ever since he traveled to Doqi continent, he had been obsessed with love all day long, and he really forgot that he had a heart that could go to the end of the world with a sword. Now, under Ling Ying's persuasion, Xian Chen really wants to go out and see the world. So do you know the way to Central Continent? After all, for me right now, Central Continent is too confusing. Xian Chen said matter-of-factly that Zhongzhou was indeed too long ago for him. Even going to an area he didn't understand would make him feel uncomfortable. Ling Ying didn't expect Xian Chen to say these words. He smiled faintly and said with a smile, "A strong and powerful person will still encounter difficulties. You really know how to joke. Besides, as long as you want to go to Zhongzhou, who else can stop you? You know, for a person with the strength of Dozan, isn't that a matter of shattering space travel? Destroy space travel?" Xian Chen was slightly stunned. He had never understood Dozan's ability. He only knew that Dozan was very strong. Facing Ling Ying's laughter and teasing, Xian Chen tried to find the Central Continent area. A bustling street gradually appeared in his mind, and then he raised his palm to shatter the space. Boom! However, although there are cracks in the space, it is not as vast as imagined. Looking at the space crack that was only the size of a palm, Xian Chen's brows knitted together. Seeing this, Ling Ying couldn't help but shake her head. "Haha, I thought you were a high-level Dozan, but it turns out you are still a low-level Dozan." Ling Ying's mocking but not mocking tone made people really unhappy. If it weren't for the fear of killing Ling Ying and leaving Xiao Suner unprotected, Su Chen would definitely kill her based on Su Chen's temper. Ground kill. "That's all, I'll look for it myself." Xian Chen smiled bitterly, but Ling Ying took out a full-column map of the Doqi continent from the ring. Pointing to the center of the map, he said seriously to Xian Chen, "Did you see it? This is Zhongzhou, and the place we are in is Dongzhou, which is also the weakest place in the entire Doqi continent. As long as you are willing to rush there, I believe that with this map, I can still send you there." Relying on a map to get to Zhongzhou? Xian Chen looked at the map with slight confusion. It was a very detailed map, although it did not introduce the contents of the map in detail. But the lines are extremely clear. Xian Chen clasped his fists in thanks to Ling Ying, then rose into the sky, like a shooting star, and rushed towards the direction pointed by the map. Such a young Dozan, I am afraid that if you look at the entire Doqi continent, he is a godlike existence. Ling Ying said with emotion, drank the unfinished wine in one gulp, and then continued to lurk in the darkness. "Are you really planning to go to Zhongzhou?" The voice of the system sounded in my mind. "Well, I plan to go there and have a look." Xian Chen replied calmly. At this moment, he was quietly sitting cross-legged on the sword. "There are many powerful people in Zhongzhou. Going there may also improve your knowledge." The system continued to reply. Xian Chen opened his eyes and looked at the white clouds around him, but remained silent. "What about your women? Don't you want them anymore? You know, those women, even in Zhongzhou, are rare beauties." The system seemed to be admonishing Xian Chen. Listening to the women it talked about, Xian Chen really felt a little bit reluctant to give up. "A man aims for 1,000 miles. Xian Chen replied calmly, and then closed his eyes again. Seeing Xian Chen being so persistent, the system stopped trying to persuade him and just disappeared as if he had never appeared before. Zhongzhou. The most powerful group of states in Doqi continent. There are many strong men who are good at fighting gathered here, and it is also a very good place to retire. I don't know how long it took, but I was at an inn in Zhongzhou. A handsome young man was eating his food silently. But suddenly, there was a chaotic noise on the street. Suanfu is not your asset. You cannot rob it by force. Suanfu. Xian Chen put down his chopsticks, frowned and looked out the window. It was a young man who was only 15 or 16 years old. At this moment, he was being beaten by a group of people wearing extremely luxurious clothes. The young man was full of ambition but lacked strength. Under the siege of those people, the young man finally vomited blood and fell to the ground unconscious. As for those guys wearing luxurious clothes, they held sticks and started to smash the gate of Xian Mansion. This Xian Mansion has been brutally destroyed since it offended the Long family. It's really a pity that Mr. Xian has been a kind man all his life, but in the end, it got into such trouble because of a piece of territory. Isn't it said that there is a young master in Suanfu who was sent to other states since he was a child? Is that young master also dead? I don't know, how many years has passed since this happened. If that young master Xian is still alive now, he should be about 20 years old. Young master Xian? Suanfu. Did you arrange all of this? Xian Chen was stunned for a moment, then frowned and asked about the system. The system was silent for a moment, and then explained casually, after the system is upgraded, it is allocated based on the existing information. Don't worry, the young master Xian they mentioned was robbed and killed by a group of bandits when he was sent to Zizhu. The ring contains the token of young master Xian. You can use this token to claim the mansion. Hearing the system's extremely irresponsible words, Xian Chen was furious. But after hearing that everything was done, Xian Chen immediately stood up and rushed towards those who were smashing the door of Xian Mansion. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 192. Look at the young man who was beaten by Fatty. Xian Chen rushed out of the inn with a vigorous step. I saw him clenching his fists and punching the guys who were surrounding them one after another. Under this sudden fist, those guys were beaten terribly. They all fell to the ground and started wailing. Wails echoed throughout the area. The people who were unaware of the melon eaters looked at the scene and clapped their hands excitedly. After all, for people like them, they are usually a group of people who just watch the fun and don't take it too seriously. Xian Chen frowned, stepped on one of the young men who smashed the door the most violently, and roared with livid anger, "Where did you come from, this evil slave? How dare you hit the door of my Xian Mansion? Those who hear it are frightened, and those who see it are chilled." Looking at this guy who claimed to be a descendant of the Xian family, they were all shocked and speechless. To them, the fact that a descendant of the Xian family could appear at this time was like someone deliberately joking. "Young master, who are you?" The young man who was beaten covered his swollen face and frowned at Xian Chen. Xian Chen looked at the young man who would rather die than give in. He took out a crystal clear elixir from the ring and placed it in his palm. Facing this young man, he said seriously, "I am Xian Chen, the last owner of this mansion." "What? He is Xian Chen? I was drinking quietly there just now, but I didn't expect that he would be the last young master of Xian Palace. This is too nonsense, isn't it? I just mentioned the last young master, and he came out right after he said it." The young man also had a confused look on his face, although he really wanted to believe that the young master in front of him who was helping was actually the young master of Suanfu. But when I thought about what the old man said before he died, I suddenly began to have deep doubts. Xian Chen saw that the young man was suspicious, so he took out the token delivered to him by the system and handed it into his hand. "This is a jade medallion. The jade medallion is red all over. Under the sunlight, it is red and tinged with gold." The young man turned the jade pendant around in confusion. When he saw clearly the writing on the back of the jade pendant, he immediately took out the jade pendant that the old man had given to him before he died. The two jade pendants merged into one, forming a round shape. The young man looked at Xian Chen excitedly and without even thinking, he knelt down and cried, "Master! 20 years have passed. You are finally back. You. The young man cried sincerely. Even if those guys had doubts in their hearts, they couldn't help but wipe the corners of their eyes when they saw the young man crying so heartbreakingly. The old man of Suanfu is a well-known good man in the city. If it wasn't for being too upright and offending his enemies, how could the Suanfu have ended up in such a state of decline? The other forces who were beaten to the ground stood up and fled. One of the young men pointed at Xian Chen and cursed, "You know you're done. How dare you hit me? Just wait to die? It doesn't matter if you are real Xian Chen or fake Xian Chen, you are done today." Seeking death, Xian Chen was furious and shook his hand in the air. The domineering young man was grasped by Xian Chen and exploded into blood mist on the spot. He could no longer die. As for the melon-eating people, they were naturally frightened. They had only heard of Xian Chen among the people, but if they had actually seen him, they really didn't have one. Now this guy who claims to be Xian Chen not only looks majestic, but also has terrifying strength. An old man with the strength to fight an emperor was so frightened that he staggered when he saw the methods used by the young man. To be able to frighten a veteran fighting emperor like this is not something that can be seen easily. The disciples beside him frowned at the fighting emperor and asked, "Sir Sword Emperor, what's going on? You're so scared that you're so scared? Isn't this in line with your status? Identity? Identity is of no use. There are so many people called Sword Emperor. You have rubbish cultivation and you don't understand. If I'm not mistaken, that young man's strength is most likely to be in Duzong. Even Duzong is not an exaggeration." "What? Duzong? Dozon?" Although the term Duzong is not a new term in the central continent. But for a young man to achieve such strength is extremely shocking. "No way. That boy is almost the same age as me, but he is actually a Duzong," the young man said in disbelief. Although he was a young man, his strength was that of a king. I have to say that it really echoes that sentence. Although there are few fighting saints in central continent, fighting kings and fighting emperors are definitely everywhere. The old man who was called the Sword King ignored the young man. Instead, he walked up to Xian Chen and looked him up and down. When he saw that he really couldn't mess with someone, he said respectfully, "I didn't expect that your excellency is the last young master of the Xian family. Hello, senior, I just came here and this happened before I even entered the door. Can you tell me what happened to my family members?" Although he picked up family members for nothing, for Xian Chen, if he can become the other person's family, he must be responsible for him to the end. The Sword Emperor took a long breath, looked at the beaten Suanfu boy, and then explained to Xian Chen. "Your Xian family is the biggest rich man in the city. Although your strength is not that great, you can say that you have all the financial resources. Therefore, the experts in your family are also among the experts. It's just that those masters are all after money. At a city meeting, it was because your father, Xian Tian, voted for his old friend. As a result, your Xian family was in trouble that night." Listening to such dramatic words, Xian Chen felt a little embarrassed. After taking the elixir given by Xian Chen, the injuries on the young man's body gradually recovered to their original state. When the young man saw Xian Chen looking at him, he cried and said, "Master, you have to avenge me and the others. If I hadn't happened to be out on business that night, I'm afraid you would have had to face this mansion when you came back. May I have your name?" Xian Chen said with a kind face, "Isn't this person who can survive the destruction of the Xian family the legendary loyal person?" Seeing that this young boy turned out to be Doling, I couldn't help but feel a little emotional. If it weren't for the systematic help, I might really be the waste they said. Back to the young master, "I am an orphan. Master Inhui gave me the name Xianchuang." "Xianchuang?" Hearing this name, Xian Chen smiled lightly. Someone who could come up with such a name must have an extremely free and easy personality. Xianchuang couldn't figure out why Xian Chen laughed, but as a servant, he didn't dare to say a word. "Old senior, my mansion still needs cleaning, so I won't keep you here." After Xian Chen said this, he raised his hand and shook the door. The horizontal door was immediately pushed open by Xian Chen easily. After taking a step forward and looking at these houses, Xian Chen had one word in his mind: luxury. Xiao Chuang, here are 100,000 gold coins. I ordered you to buy some slaves and come back to clean them. 100,000 gold coins. Xian Chuang stared at Xian Chen in a daze, but when he saw Xian Chen actually took out a black crystal card common to Dochi continent, he hurriedly caught it and patted his chest to promise that it would be completed. Watching Xian Chuang leave, Xian Chen began to walk around the compound. After walking for half an hour, Xian Chen barely finished. I have to say, this mansion is really luxurious. But the thought of letting a person with only Doling cultivation guard this mansion really made him feel a little wronged. Now that he came to his own territory, Xian Chen immediately bought several bodyguards with the strength of the Do Wang and the Do Huang from the system store. Looking at this team of about 100 people, each leader is a Dozang. Then he said lightly, from now on, you are responsible for guarding the 4 directions of the Suanfu, the southeast, northwest, and the last team is to protect the main entrance. As you command. These guards only take orders from Xian Chen. Immediately began to disperse, rushing towards the location they needed to guard. At the door, those people who were still talking about each other were extremely confused when they noticed that a group of people walked out of the courtyard. However, when they saw that the leader of the team was actually a Dozang, they were all so frightened that they shut up. Under Dozang's arrangement, the people guarding the door were 3 Do Wangs and 3 Do Emperors. Seeing such a huge lineup, some who were still suspicious of Xian Chen's identity hurriedly shut up. After all, such a huge lineup is no longer something people like them can easily offend. As for the Sword Emperor who had not yet left, he seemed to be dumbfounded when he noticed this scene. Looking at these murderous people, he said with shock, "It's true. That Mr. Xian Chen. It's very likely that he is Dozan. He can let so many strong men serve as bodyguards. It seems that over the years, that Xian Chen there must be huge support behind Chen Chen. This is too exaggerated. Even those ancient families are not so arrogant. Oh my God, I actually used Do Wang and Do Huang as gatekeepers, is this Xian Chen out of his mind?" Just as this guy finished speaking, those responsible for guarding all stared with murderous looks on their faces. The guy with the strength of Dozang stepped in front of him first and looked at him with murderous intent, but he didn't say anything. And this monk, who was only at the peak of Doling, was so frightened that he couldn't help but pee his pants when he saw Dozong thrust directly into his head. "If you ever humiliate my lord again, kill him." A cold tone came from this Dozong's mouth. He glanced around at the people eating melons and trembled with fear when they saw them, and then walked back to the mansion. "I seem to have almost died just now. My God, it seems that those who destroyed Suanfu have come to an end. Sigh, it's just a pity that Mr. Xian, if Mr. Xian were still alive in the world and saw his son so powerful, I'm afraid he would have closed his eyes even under Jiquan." While these people were discussing, Xian Chuang finally led many carriages towards the mansion. Those people looked at the carriages in surprise, but Xian Chuang also looked confused. There was no one in front of the mansion gate, but there were so many powerful people behind it. Even if this Xian Chen was fake, Xian Chuang would admit it. After all, just go for that jade pendant. That's enough to prove everything. Following Xian Chuang's order, a large number of maids and servants began to walk down from the carriages. Seeing that the person guarding the door was exuding murderous aura, the servants and maids were too frightened to raise their heads, so they had to wait silently at the door. "Wait a minute." A Do Huang stretched out his hand to stop him, walked up to Xian Chuang, looked at him, and found that he had Xian Chen's aura on him, and then frowned and asked, "Who are you?" "Senior, I'm Xian Chuang, young master Xian Chen's slave." "Oh? Then who are these people behind you?" Do Huang continued to ask, looking at the maids and servants who only had the strength of Dojia, and then continued to ask. These are the maidservants who were found according to the young master's instructions. Xian Shuang said calmly, and Do Huang silently nodded and motioned for him to lead people in. As Xian Shuang led the way, these maids and servants followed in extremely cautiously. It seems that Suanfu is about to rise again. Oh my God, you don't know that just now, the east, west, south and north gates all had the same lineup as here. It's really scary. It's simply more powerful than the original Suanfu. Haha, it's hard to say. Don't forget, although the original Suanfu was not as good as the current Suanfu, what was the result? In the face of crisis, didn't those people run away on their own? I think what you said is wrong. Those people are paid for, but these people all came back with Xian Chen. Do you think those people can really be compared with these people? This. After being told something incoherent, the man rubbed his head in disgrace and embarrassment. As for these maids and servants being led into the Xian mansion, Xian Chen was already sitting silently in the center of the courtyard. As for behind him, there were all Do Huang standing. These fighting emperors are all bursting with momentum, so don't be too arrogant. Looking at these fighting emperors who each have energy wings, the expressions of the maids and servants are also very exciting. Xian Shuang looked at such a strong lineup and cried out as he looked at it. Xian Chen walked up to Xian Shuang, put his hand on his shoulder, and comforted him. What's wrong, little one? Why are you crying? Young master, I cried because I was happy. If I could see the young master coming back with so many strong men, I would definitely be very happy. Xian Shuang said with tears and runny nose. Looking at this young man, Xian Chen felt extremely complicated. Although Xian Shuang was a young man, he was already an adult at heart. And he grew up eating the food of the Xian family. Naturally, he was extremely excited when he saw the Xian family come back from the dead. Xian Chen held him in his arms and patted him on the back to comfort him. Okay, manly man, why are you crying? Come here, and you will be responsible for his safety from now on, do you understand? Xian Chen said as he spoke to a Do Huang. The fighting emperor walked up to Xian Shuang, then suddenly knelt down on one knee and shouted an oath to Xian Shuang, number 40. I have met the master. I can't do it. I can't do it, young master. I'm just a doling, and I'm also a domestic slave. I'm grateful enough to be able to stay in the Xian mansion. How can I let Senior Do Huang be my bodyguard? It's really impossible. Xian Shuang knelt on the ground with a thud. Looking at the nervous Xian Shuang, Xian Chen pulled him up and said seriously, after I come back, you will be the only one left in this Xian palace. So, since there are only you and me left in this Xian palace, their surname is Xian, so from today on, you, Xian Shuang, will be my younger brother, how about that? But Xian Shuang hesitated. How could he dare to accept such a great favor from Xian Chen? Nothing but, if you refuse me again, then I will kick you out of the house. Xian Chen pretended to be angry, and Xian Shuang was so frightened that he immediately stood up, clasped his fists towards Xian Chen and shouted, Brother Chuang. I've met my eldest brother. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 193. Seeing Xian Shuang recognize his cheap brother, Xian Chen put his hand on his shoulder with a doting look on his face. Turning to look at the maids and servants who had been summoned, Xian Chen said boldly to everyone, Everyone. Suanfu once declined, but now I, Xian Chen, am back. I hope that you will do your best to work for my Suanfu. Of course, I will not treat you unfairly in terms of salary. Since I have just returned to the mansion, how about the salary is 3,000 per person per month? Xian Chen raised his hand and said, but the maids and servants looked confused. For people like them, servants are servants, and maids are maids. Since they have signed a lifelong contract, no matter how much money they have, for people like them, they have the life to take it but not the life to spend it. Xian Chen looked at these people who were in a daze and was silent for a moment before continuing. Of course, you all have the right to leave, but you must work in Xian Mansion for 5 years. Can you still leave? Our contract is a lifetime contract. Master, I shouldn't ask, but are you sure about what you said? Although we are just a group of servants, we also want to have our own little family. Xian Chuang was slightly startled. Xian Chen's words were undoubtedly unprecedented. Although he recognized Xian Chen as his brother, in the final analysis, he still regarded Xian Chen as his master. Xian Chen exhaled a breath of filthy air and continued to the inquiring servant, I can guarantee that as long as you can do it for 5 years, that person will be able to leave. If no one asks you to leave, you can come to me directly. And Suanfu's business will be handed over to you free of charge. The premise is that you must be able to bring enough benefits to our Suanfu in the past 5 years. As the saying goes, those who are capable work hard. I believe that all of you here should not just think about being a maid and a servant. The cakes Xian Chen throws out are often the ones these people need most. Even though Xian Chen's words were full of drama, these maids and servants really believed them. Under Xian Chen's brainwashing, these people all looked excited when they saw Xian Chen's courage. Finally, under Xian Chen's arrangement, a group of management personnel were selected from these servants. Looking at the people going about their business, Xian Chen made arrangements to a steward, go find some more guards, maids, and servants. Our Xian Mansion will accept them all. Young master, you can't arrange it like this. If someone bad comes in, wouldn't it be a loss to the Xian Palace? Xian Chuang said worriedly, but Xian Chen gave him a reassuring smile. After a moment of silence, he continued to say to the steward, Xian Mansion must be stronger, and it must be stronger than before. Of course, choose to come people must pass the examination of Xian Chuang. Don't worry, young master. Although I'm just a servant, I still know how to behave. This man took the crystal card given to him by Xian Chen, and, accompanied by 2 powerful Do Wang warriors, rushed towards the recruitment hall in the city. After a while, looking at the servants and maids starting to clean the courtyard, Xian Chen said lightly to Xian Chuang, do you still remember who the old man offended? Take me there. After all, the other party can't do this to our Xian Mansion. Are you just watching the other party take advantage? Don't worry, young master, those people are all in Chuang's mind. Xian Chuang was extremely happy. The comeback of Xian Mansion was naturally extremely important in his eyes. Now Xian Chen personally said that he wanted to take action against those guys. Seeing such a huge team, he immediately led the way and led everyone towards one of the clans that attacked Xian Mansion in the first place. So many teams and people walking on the streets. Those pedestrians were naturally frightened. Even those who had the strength to fight against the king were so frightened that they couldn't help but stand aside when they saw such a huge team organization. After an unknown amount of time, Xian Chuang puffed out his chest and led everyone to an imposing mansion with a closed door. Looking at this extremely luxurious mansion, Xian Chen immediately raised his hand and waved. A fighting emperor behind him, as if he could read his mind, immediately burst out with fighting energy and struck hard at the gate of the mansion. With this extremely powerful energy, how could the wooden door be able to resist it at will? The wooden door was blown to pieces. There were actually all guards standing in the courtyard of the mansion. Looking at the guards holding weapons, Xian Chen roared at the rear team, kill me. No one will be spared. Anyone who dares to bully my Xian Mansion will die. Xian Chen roared angrily, and the fighting emperors and fighting kings each exploded with momentum and immediately charged towards the mansion. Although there are Do Huangs and Do Wangs guarding the courtyard in this mansion, in the eyes of Xian Chen, these 20 Do Huangs and 50 Do Wangs are really nothing. Xianchen also burst out with Dozun momentum, but with just a volley, a dying old man was immediately grabbed by the neck and slammed to the ground. Xianchen stepped on the old man's chest with the solace of his feet and said with a sullen expression, "You were the one who took the lead in destroying the Xian mansion." "No. Don't kill me, I didn't mean to. If I knew that Suanfu had such a powerful force as you, I would definitely not dare to take action at will. This old man has the strength of a fighting sect, which is enough to daunt the mighty ones in the Jiaji Empire." Now he was stepped on by Xianchen. It had to be said that the Stochi continent was indeed a terrifying area headed by the strong. The old man vomited blood and finally passed away without taking a breath. As for the palace guards who faced the attack of the group Duang, they were almost completely wiped out by Suanken's team. Not long after, looking at the family members who were kneeling and begging for mercy in the yard, Xianchen exhaled a breath and said lightly to these people, "You can go, it will not harm your family. Although I, Xianchen, am not a good person, I am not a good person either, bad guy." The family members were grateful, and then they ran away like crazy under the gaze of Xianchen and the guards. Xianchen looked at the empty mansion and said softly to Xianchuang, "Xiaochuang, how about giving this mansion to you? If you like it, I can arrange some more guards for you." "No, young master. The young master has already given enough favor to Xianchuang. If Xianchuang needs the young master again, he will really be sorry for the young master's cultivation." Lu Chuang could still clearly distinguish between right and wrong. Seeing that this young man knew so much about human nature and sophistication at such a young age, Xianchen couldn't help but take a new look at him. "Master, the last family is the lord of the city, and they are also the old friends of the master who voted back then." When Xianchen looked at him, Xianchuang hesitated for a moment, but then suddenly said this. Xianchen glanced at the other party in confusion, frowned at Xianchuang and asked, "What? Do you suspect that among the people who destroyed Xian Mansion, there were old friends of the old man?" "Well, young master, although it is very inappropriate to be suspicious like this, but think about it, since the relationship between the master and that person is so good, why did he not see that person leading the team to come to support after the Suanfu was destroyed? Besides, with the master's character, it is impossible to make careless friends, but at that time, there was no one from the city lord's mansion. After all, there are many forces from the city lord's palace in the city. They can do such a big thing under his eyes. How could no one inform the city lord's palace? And one more thing. When I came back and saw the miserable situation in the Xian palace, I immediately went to the city lord's palace. But the result was unexpected, but I was kicked out by the other party's slaves." Xianchuang's tone was heavy, and he was completely angry with the people in the city lord's mansion. Is a friend who can withhold support at critical moments still worthy of being called a friend? After hearing what Xianchuang said, Xianchen looked solemn. Although Xianchuang's words were mixed with a lot of anger, it had to be said that the other party was really thinking about things. If it is true as Xianchuang said, then naturally there is no need for this so-called city lord's mansion to continue to exist. This time Xianchen did not continue to bring these guards with him, but decisively let Xianchuang lead the way. Now that the matter has come to this, it is a fact that no matter how many guards follow behind, it will not help. Walking on the street, the aura of Xianchen Dozun burst out in an instant. The pedestrians who were watching were immediately frightened to the point where they knelt down and bowed their heads, obviously not daring to face the terrifying look from Xianchen. The name of the city is Gukan, and the city lord can also earn a lot of money for transporting the city from the taxes in this Gukan. Faced with such a fox-like person, Xianchen made a decisive choice and had a face-to-face conversation with him. A magnificent mansion. Xianchen's arrival made the guard immediately vomit blood. Incomparably powerful air waves erupted from Xianchen's body. The shock caused the furnishings in the city lord's palace to become a mess. The person here is Xianchen's nephew, a middle-aged man with a strong back rushed towards the side from the hall. After all, he was afraid that if he came one step later, Xian Chen might really destroy his mansion. It was demolished. Seeing that this middle-aged man with a strong back and strong waist turned out to be a being with Dezong cultivation, Xian Chen taunted him coldly, "My Suanfu is a good friend of yours, why didn't you send someone to rescue me before? Is it true that there is some ulterior secret cooperation between you and those guys, as rumored in the city?" Xian Chen's inquiry was not only cold, but also like a thorny silver needle, piercing deeply into the middle-aged heart. The middle-aged man named Chen Wei is not only an old friend of Xian Chen's cheap father, but also the current lord of the lonely city. But such an honest-looking guy might actually be the one who conspired to destroy the Xian family. Chen Wei was heartbroken, hammered his chest, took out a dagger and stabbed himself in the abdomen. Blood overflowed from the corner of the mouth. He knelt down on the ground with a puff towards Su Chen. "That day, I was very drunk while receiving guests in my mansion. When I learned that Suanfu had been destroyed, it was already the next morning." Chen Wei said sadly, but Xian Chuang pointed at the other party and yelled, "Maybe what he drank was the celebration wine. Why are you pretending here? Now our young master is back. Just wait to die." "Xian Chen. You can doubt others, but you can't doubt me. I, Chen Wei, was saved by your father. How could I do something that goes against my conscience?" Chen Wei said impatiently, like a man who had lost his mind, crying to Xian Chen. "You're still pretending. Then I went back to your mansion to find help that day. Why did someone beat me up with a stick? If you weren't guilty, how could such a thing happen?" Xian Chuang was aggressive. Looking at Xian Chuang's appearance, Chen Wei remained silent, obviously not intending to meet this young man. Looking at Chen Wei who was still bleeding, Xian Chen took out a breath and said lightly, "The hatred for killing my father is irreconcilable." After saying that, Xian Chen raised his palm and shook it, and some of the guards in the back row of Chen Wei were killed on the spot and turned into blood mist. Chen Wei was stunned for a moment. He was a being with Dezong's strength. Ever since he saw Xian Chen's strength, he had decided not to fight against him. Now looking at Xian Chen's ruthless attack, he obviously didn't intend to give himself a chance to survive, so he stood up and cursed fiercely at Su Chen, "Boy! Don't bully others too much. I really didn't do that thing. I, Chen Wei, sit upright and behave properly." Seeking death, Xian Chen arrived in front of this man in an instant, and with just one quick punch, Chen Wei's whole body was slammed against the wall with a loud bang. Chen Wei, who only felt that his bones were broken, wanted to resist but was helpless. But Xian Chuang warned Xian Chen, "Young master, you can't pity this kind of person. This is how I was deceived by him." Although Xian Chuang only had the strength of Doling, he was swooping towards the guards of the city lord's mansion with complete anger at this moment. The guards wanted to resist, but they were powerless. After all, the young man standing was a terrifying existence that even their sect leader was extremely afraid of. After Xian Chuang taught several guards a lesson, Xian Chen held down his shoulders from behind and continued to say to the dying Chen Wei, "I will spare your life until I find out what happened before I make a decision." "Dad. This is a lunatic. You don't want to listen to our explanation at all." A young man rushed to Chen Wei in a panic to check Chen Wei's injuries. Chen Wei coughed up dirty blood and said to the young man with hatred, "If you hadn't allowed me to send troops, how could our two families have ended up like this?" "I." The young man felt extremely regretful and slapped himself hard on the face. "City Lord, young City Lord, Xian Chen came back this time. I heard that he brought Du Huang and Du Wang with him, and even Du Zong among them. And these people, the number of them, the number is over 100. What?" Chen Wei's pupils dilated in shock. When he heard this terrifying team, his neck immediately tilted and he fainted on the spot. "Dad! Dad! The young man saw that his father was so frightened that he fainted. He hesitated for a moment and rushed out of the house. After seeing the backs of Xianchen and Xianchen, he immediately knelt on the ground and shouted loudly towards Xianchen, "Master Xianchen, please save my father. It's all my fault. I am willing to die on behalf of my father. Go and fight for the Xian family. Those brothers who died must pay for their lives." Xianchen slowly turned around and looked at the young man kneeling on the ground kowtowing to him, with a trace of murderous intent flashing in his eyes. After taking a deep breath, he ducked in front of the young man, lifted him up easily, and warned with a stern face, "With so many lives in the Xian family, can you just say compensation is enough? My father was really drunk that day. Many clan leaders in the city can testify. I was the one who stopped Xian from coming over to ask for help. After hearing that the Xian family was destroyed, I was also heartbroken, but our city lord's palace had just taken over. This is the heart of the people. Unstable, if it really goes, we will also lose our lives. I'm sorry." Facing the young man who was crying miserably, Suanken's fist that he wanted to hit on the other's face was forced to fall. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui by Xiong. Chapter 194. We'll discuss it later. Xianchen's extremely plain voice sounded in the ears of the young master of the Chen family. Xianchuang looked at the young master of the Chen family who was kneeling on the ground, his eyes full of complaints. Entered the courtyard. Looking at Chen Wei being helped up, when the servants noticed Xianchen coming, they were too frightened to move. However, Xianchen pretended not to see these servants and said, "Your son has admitted that he is responsible for this matter. If someone is responsible for this matter, I will reluctantly save you." After hearing Xianchen's words, the guards hurriedly moved the couch and laid Chen Wei down smoothly. Looking at the dying Chen Wei, Xianchen shook his head helplessly when he checked the opponent's injuries and said, "It can't be saved, his heart has been split into two by the dagger. Even if he is saved, it will only be a flashback." The servants looked at each other. Chen Wei was their master, and now he was going to die like this. For these servants, it was undoubtedly the biggest blow. Xianchuang ran in from outside. With a dark face, he whispered to Xianchen, "Young master, the young master of the Chen family committed suicide." "Master." Although Xianchuang was very young, he was still heard by the servants, and they all cried loudly, obviously showing their loyalty. Xianchen ignored Xianchuang's words, stared at Chen Wei lying on the couch, and said calmly, "Since someone is dying on your behalf, I, Xianchen, have to save you even if I go against the law of heaven. It's not the Holy Mother of Xianchen. Now the other party is also a white-haired person sending a black-haired person. What's more, the victim has voluntarily admitted his crime, not to mention that he committed suicide for his crime." Determined not to harm his family, Xianchen took out a pill and put it into Chen Wei's mouth. Along with the elixir's human body, Chen Wei's entire body exuded extremely strange colors. Looking at this colorful light, the servants had never seen such a scene before, and they all kowtowed to Xianchen to thank Xianchen for saving their city lord's life. After taking the elixir, Chen Wei slowly opened his eyes. When he saw Xianchen, he was so frightened that he sat up hurriedly. But when he looked at the servant who was kneeling and bowing his head, Chen Wei's eyes were full of doubts. "Don't be surprised. I saved your life. Now you not only owe my old man a life, but you also owe me a life. You'd better think about how you should pay it back in the future." Xianchen spoke calmly, and Chen Wei was so shocked that his whole body shivered. Having solved it himself, he naturally knew what the result would be, but such a person had a way to forcefully pull himself back from the gate of hell. Chen Wei looked solemn, took a deep breath, and then suddenly knelt on one knee in front of Xianchen, clasping his fists towards Xianchen in gratitude, and said, "Young Master Xian's righteousness, Chen Wei will bear it in his heart. If there is any need in the future, Chen Wei is willing to serve as your master. Go up to the mountain of swords and go down to the sea of fire without hesitation. I hope what you said today is true. Xian Chen looked at Chen Wei calmly, waved his hands as if nothing had happened, and left calmly outside the city lord's mansion. When Chen Wei looked at Xian Chen's back with a melancholy look on his face, a servant came to Chen Wei frightened and said with great fear, "The city lord, the young city lord, he, in order to let Mr. Xian Chen save you, already committed suicide." What? Chen Wei's body trembled, and he was swaying. The servant hurriedly helped him, so he didn't faint after hearing the news. Xian Chen and the other two walked out of the city lord's mansion and looked at the young master of the Chen family who was covered with a white cloth. There was no trace of pity in their eyes. After all, Xian Chen didn't feel any guilt about this kind of thing. A person who can remain indifferent to the destruction of his savior is not worthy of feeling sorry for him. Along the way, Xian Chuang looked at Xian Chen with eyes full of admiration. He wished he could become someone like Xian Chen. Xian Chen put his hand on his shoulder and said lightly to Xian Chuang, "One day, I will make the name Suanfu famous throughout the Doqi continent." "Young master, I believe that day will definitely come." Xian Chuang believed in Xian Chen's words. Who could have such a young and powerful descendant? Back at the mansion, Xian Chen looked at the spiritual tablets placed in the morning hall. After hesitating for a moment, Xian Chen decided to burn incense for these people. As for Xian Chuang, he squatted on the ground and burned paper very honestly. Now that the Xian family's enemies have been avenged, everyone can rest in peace. After finishing the incense, Xian Chen walked out of the morning hall. Xian Chuang, who was beside him, followed closely and asked Xian Chen innocently, "Master, does the master have a young mistress? If there is a young mistress, why not take the young mistress over to live with you?" Xian Chuang's sudden words stopped Xian Chen on the spot. Thinking of Nalan Yanran and others, it would still be too early to bring them all here. There was silence for a moment. Looking at the innocent young man, Xian Chen replied seriously to him, "A real man should not be involved in love when he is away from home. Remember, to achieve great things, the first thing to leave behind is love." Xiao Chuang will keep it in mind. Thank you, master, for reminding me. Although Xian Chuang didn't agree with Xian Chen's words, looking at a being who had left Xian Mansion for more than 20 years and could come back to avenge those who died, he had nothing to complain about. What fun place is there in this isolated city? You can't stay in the mansion every day, right? Xian Chen asked Xian Chuang softly, and Xian Chuang scratched his head before replying to Xian Chen, "There are interesting places in Gukan, but it is too dangerous. The master said when he was still alive that if you are not a fighting saint, you will definitely be killed if you enter a narrow escape from death." Oh? How could there be such a terrifying place in this isolated city? Haha, then I'm going to have a look. Xian Chen had a very good interest in the scary places mentioned by Xian Chuang. For Xian Chen, the more terrifying the places, the more terrifying places people like him should go. In a busy street somewhere in the isolated city, there is a very dilapidated dry well in the center of the street. And around the dry well, there were actually many yellow talismans placed. These talismans were hung on black stones. Looking at the talismans on these stones, Xian Chen instantly thought of the scene when he first came here. At that time, I was dressed like a Taoist priest. When the pedestrians were afraid of not getting close to the dry well, Xian Chen suddenly approached. Looking down at the dry well, his calm eyes made the pedestrians stop in their tracks. Who is this person? How dare you get close to this dry well? You must know that this dry well has been cursed. Isn't this guy afraid of being cursed? This person seems to be Xian Chen. Xian Chen? Is that the boy who took revenge on the spot when he came back and led many fighting kings and fighting emperors? What kid? He is really capable. A Tuzong strongman in Jikan said that the Suankan's cultivation is most likely from Tuzong. Everyone couldn't help but take a breath. Such a terrifying lineup immediately shut up those who were still doubting Xian Chen. Since it was on the street, the comments from passers-by naturally reached Suanken's ears. "Master, this is the forbidden area I mentioned before, and it is also the place where the master warned me to be extremely careful. But it's mostly a rumor. No one knows exactly what's in it yet." Xian Chuang explained to Xian Chen, his tone full of uncertainty. Xian Chen glanced at the other party slightly doubtfully, and then immediately rushed towards the dry well under the nervous gazes of everyone. There was only a splash of water, and as they watched the water splash onto the ground, the expressions of the pedestrians changed extremely wonderfully. What's more, they picked up the suana and started playing it. Xian Chuang was so frightened by Xian Chen's actions that he fell to the ground with a thud. He watched helplessly as Xian Chen jumped into the dry well. After reacting, Xian Chuang immediately lay down beside the dry well and kept shouting towards the dry well. "Master! Master!" Xian Chuang's voice gradually became hoarse. Xian Chen had just come back and went to such a forbidden place. Isn't this just because he had nothing to eat and was full? But those passers-by, some monks with advanced cultivation, walked to the dry well and bowed deeply. For people like them, Xian Chen's behavior is undoubtedly a kind of fearless spirit. Seeing the bows of these Do Huangs and Do Wangs, Xian Chuang's eyes became swollen from tears inadvertently. "Call out!" Just as Xian Chuang was crying, a black shadow suddenly appeared next to him. Xian Chuang, whose eyes were red from crying, looked at the sudden appearance of the visitor and asked him immediately, "Senior 440, do you think the young master will be in danger?" The master said before his death that the things under this dry well, but even Do Shen is afraid of the existence of 3 points. Facing Xian Chuang's wails, Do Huang, numbered 40, had an extremely proud expression on his face. He comforted Xian Chuang and said, "Don't worry, young master. Master, he will definitely be fine. I believe that with the master's strength, it is not difficult to get down into a dry well." Although Si Ling's tone was simple, in Xian Chuang's heart, it was undoubtedly his words to comfort himself. The passers-by didn't realize it, and even the powerful men who bowed to the dry well were shocked by the tone of this fighting emperor who came from the Suanfu. The dangers of this dry well are naturally very clear to natives like them, but such a terrifying existence, in the eyes of outsiders, is played down as if it were a family act. However, it is really because Suanfu is too strong now, so they can only swallow some words and say it themselves. In a dry well. Xian Chen stepped down from the dry well and immediately felt as if he had plunged into another space. In this space, apart from the dark and blurry environment, there was no trace of living things. Just when Xian Chen was about to burst out his whole body's energy to break through the shackles of this space, an extremely dazzling light suddenly brightened right in front of him. "Here it is." Xian Chen frowned and looked at this place with a very beautiful environment. He couldn't believe that someone could actually open up a new small space in Dochi continent. This is an endless lake, and in the very center of the lake is the island that Xian Chen steps on. There are flowers and plants on the isolated island, and there is also a thatched hut. Looking at this strange yet familiar environment, Xian Chen felt a little complicated inside. Boo-hoo-hoo. Just when Xian Chen looked confused, several extremely sharp sword shadows came from all directions. Seeing these terrifying sword energies, Xian Chen immediately erupted an energy barrier to resist without even thinking. Bang bang bang. The energy barrier broke almost instantly and condensed almost instantly. It was such an extremely terrifying sword shadow when facing Xian Chen. "It seems a little difficult." "Huh?" A surprised voice sounded in this space. Immediately afterwards, he saw an extremely huge palm suddenly falling towards Xian Chen's head. Although this is a giant hand, judging from the slender fingers, it is obviously from a woman. Xian Chen raised his brows and waved his right hand. A peerless sword exuding terrifying sword power was held tightly in his hand. Just when the palm was about to land on Xian Chen's head, Xian Chen threw the peerless sword in his hand into the air, and then the sword pierced his palm at an extremely fast speed. Wow! The owner of the palm seemed to be in pain and retreated into the clouds on the spot. However, just when Xian Chen was on guard, a resentful voice suddenly came from behind him. "Who are you? Why did you break into my dojo? Don't you know that the result of breaking into my dojo privately is death?" This angry voice made Xian Chen slightly stunned. Xian Chen, who frowned and said nothing, did not turn around. He reacted and replied dissatisfiedly, "I'm just curious about what is hidden in this dry well. You kill me at the slightest disagreement. You are really majestic and ruthless." The owner of the voice was slightly silent, looking at the strange man's back, biting his lip, and then pushed hard on Xian Chen's back with his hand. Xian Chen turned around and looked at this peerless beauty wearing a white plain skirt and a black silk shawl, and felt a little dazed for a moment. "What a nice view," Xian Chen murmured to himself, looking at the peerless beauty in front of him, and immediately couldn't help but stretch his skirt towards her waist. "What are you doing?" The woman was obviously frightened by Xian Chen's sudden behavior. After all, a normal person would never do something shameful. Xian Chen only reacted to the woman's sudden drink. He looked at the retreating woman and noticed the gesture of his palm. He scratched his head in embarrassment, took a deep breath, and then apologized to the woman. "Xian Chen, I just acted recklessly, I hope you don't mind." "You." This woman had obviously never seen such a shameless person. She gritted her teeth and said unwillingly to Xian Chen, "Thank you for your good looks, you are such an abrupt person." Just when the woman pointed at Xian Chen noticed that there was a bloody hole in the woman's right hand. Thinking of the giant white hand in front of him, Xian Chen immediately grasped the opponent's palm tightly. Noticing that the opponent's expression was in pain, Xian Chen used his other hand to use fighting energy to treat him. Feeling the source of energy coming from the stranger in front of you, this beautiful woman, who was like a fairy descending to earth, forgot her anger for a moment and just watched quietly. I don't know how long it took, but as her palms returned to their original state, Xian Chen's face turned a little pale. "Haha, a mere dozun actually dared to help me treat, fortunately it was only one hand. If it had been the whole body, I'm afraid you would have died on the spot." After this woman was treated, instead of thanking Xian Chen, she pretended to be disgusted and complained. Xian Chen ignored the ridicule from the other party, let go of the other party's slender hand, and then deliberately gave in. He cupped his fists towards the beautiful woman who looked like a fairy and asked, "I wonder if the girl can tell me where this place is." The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 195. This place is called Wangqing Lake. Why? Could it be that young master is interested in this place? The woman in the white dress covered her mouth and smiled softly, looking at Xian Chen with curiosity. Facing the woman's sweet smile, Xian Chen shook his head and refused to reply. "Haha, the girl is overthinking. I don't care about this area, but I want to find out more from the girl. Since this place is like the human world, Wonderland. Why is there an exit that can connect here on that flat land? Based on this situation, did the girl deliberately arrange the dry well?" Xian Chen made a bold assumption. The girl in the white dress was silent, looking at her white palms, and then said lightly to Xian Chen, "This place is called Wangqing Lake. I expanded it when I was bored. As for what you said about the dry well that can connect here, I'm not very sure. Maybe it was accidentally left behind when we expanded this place." The girl in the white dress said perfunctorily, which made Xian Chen guess a lot. If it can be called Wangqing Lake, then the girl in front of her is most likely to have been deceived by a man before. "Do you have anything else to ask?" The woman in the white dress looked at the young man in front of her who was asking her question, then raised her hand and waved lightly. This scene of an island and lake suddenly turned into a fairyland on earth. Looking at the surroundings shrouded in fairy mist, Xianchen frowned at the woman in the white dress beside him and asked, "Where is this place?" "This is the heavenly palace." The woman in the white dress had a cold face, gently opened her red lips and explained calmly to Xianchen. "Heavenly palace?" Hearing this, Xianchen's brows were filled with a hint of worry. If this was the heavenly palace, it would be enough to prove that he had left Dochi continent. "How about you stay and be my book boy? You know, how many people dream of becoming my Yaokai fairy's book boy?" Fairy Yaokai hesitated for a moment, looked at Xianchen's indifferent expression, and finally asked. Becoming a book boy with a peerless beauty is what many people dream of, but for Xianchen, these are not what he wants. Today, Xianchen has already developed a sense of immunity towards women. So no matter how beautiful the Yaokai fairy is and how good her figure is, she still can't catch Xianchen's eyes. "Sorry, I refuse." Xianchen very calmly refused Fairy Yaokai's invitation, which made Fairy Yaokai very puzzled. Her beautiful eyelashes trembled slightly. Looking at this strange young man's decision, she was slightly stunned. Just as Xianchen was communicating with the Yaokai fairy, a young man riding a black tiger was like a god descending to earth, carrying thousands of feet of golden light and flying towards the two of them quickly. Watching this scene happen, Xianchen, who should have taken action, was instead held behind by Fairy Yaokai. This subtle movement of his made Xianchen feel a little weird. The person who came was wearing a green robe and had a long sword on his waist. He looked elegant, majestic, and extremely eye-catching. "What are you doing here?" Fairy Yaokai seemed to have no good impression of this young man, and asked in a cold tone. Hearing this, a hint of coldness flashed in the eyes of the young man who came riding a tiger. However, when he paid attention to the unfamiliar face being protected by Yaokai fairy, he nodded with a smile, smiled at Yaokai fairy and said, "Haha, I have nothing to do. I just happened to pass by and saw you here, so I stopped by to take a look." "Haha, Xiang Mu, you don't have to do this. I said that I will not recognize the marriage contract between master and your father. You should give up on this." When Fairy Yaokai faced Xiang Mu, her eyes were full of disgust. Although Xiang had a majestic appearance, if he could make a peerless beauty hate him, he must not be a good person at heart. Being slapped in the face by Fairy Yaokai in public, Xiang Mu's face naturally didn't look good. With anger hidden in his heart, he finally chose to vent all his anger on the young man who suddenly appeared. Xianchen looked at Xiang Mu silently and noticed the hostility coming from Xiang Mu. When Xiang Mu was about to speak, he suddenly hugged Fairy Yaokai's waist. Xianchen held her slender waist easily in his arms. He felt Fairy Yaokai's delicate body tremble slightly, but a knowing smile appeared on Xianchen's face. When Xiang Mu saw this situation, how could he bear it? His eyes exuded ferocious murderous intent. He watched helplessly as Fairy Yaokai, who was regarded as his woman, was embraced by outsiders. The momentum he immediately burst out was enough to arrogantly dominate the entire film. Fighting continent. The unparalleled terrifying aura rushed towards his face, but it did not make Xianchen feel even a little scared. For the current Xianchen, with the system, he seems to own the entire sky, so no matter how terrifying this person's momentum is. For the current Xianchen, it is just a drizzle. Having long been accustomed to this kind of terrifying pressure, Xiang Mu's eyes exuded viciousness. He pointed his finger at Xianchen and shouted loudly, "Boy! Get your dirty hands off. Otherwise, don't blame me for killing you on the spot." "Xiang Mu! Who are you threatening? This is my lady's territory. If you have the ability, try touching him." Fairy Yaokai raised her white left hand and easily resolved the pressure from Xiang Mu. Just when Xiang Mu looked shocked, there was a crisp sound, and Xiang Mu froze in place. It turned out that just when Fairy Yaokai was resolving the oppression, Xianchen had already slapped Xiang Mu hard on the left side of his face. Perhaps because the force of the slap was too arrogant, it actually made Xiangmu proud. His handsome face suddenly became swollen. You dare to hit me. My Xiang family is very powerful in the heavenly palace, and it will do you no good to offend me. Xiangmu stared at Xianchen in stunned silence, as if he never cared about a person like Xianchen from the bottom of his heart. Seems like it. But for such a person, after Xiangmu finished speaking, Xianchen slapped him hard in the face again. However, it was not over yet. Just when Xiangmu thought it was over, Xianchen suddenly raised his leg and kicked Xiangmu hard in the abdomen. Feeling pain in his abdomen, Xiangmu immediately turned over and fell to his knees. Xianchen raised his foot and crushed his head several times, then frowned and said disdainfully, "What I, Xianchen, have always hated are second-generation ancestors like you who rely on family background. Now I want to take a look. How terrible will the consequences of offending your Xiang family be?" Fairy Yaokai stood behind Xianchen. Although Xiangmu had such a marriage contract with her, Fairy Yaokai really couldn't arouse the slightest interest in a person like Xiangmu whose private life was chaotic. "Yaokai," Xiangmu looked at Fairy Yaokai angrily, even with a ferocious face as if he wanted to eat her alive. Fairy Yaokai quietly looked at Xiangmu who was beaten into a pig's head by Xianchen. He hesitated for a moment, then frowned at Xianchen and said, "Boy, I advise you to spare him. Although his strength is indeed not very good, his family background is indeed extremely terrifying." Xianchen loosened his grip on Xiangmu only after being able to get a woman who was very likely to have the strength of a fighting saint to say such words of warning. After frowning on WeChat, Wei Wuxian continued to say to Fairy Yaokai, "He obviously has the cultivation of Do Sheng, why do I feel that he is not my opponent?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 196. The Heavenly Palace is full of vitality. Even a newborn child is very likely to become a Duzong if he is lucky. The Xiang family has hundreds of years of foundation in this heavenly palace. It is not unusual for him to grow into a fighting saint. Fairy Yaokai explained calmly, but she didn't know that every word she said was like thunder, shocking Xianchen. In Doqi continent, if you want to break through in cultivation, you must practice steadily and step by step. This Tiangong is better. The cultivation resources alone are enough to be familiar with Suankan's system. The cheating-like field is enough to allow all talented monks to successfully cultivate to a height that many people aspire to and are almost unattainable. When Xiangmu saw Yaokai actually telling the secret of Tiangong, his face turned extremely dark. Without even thinking, he burst out his last strength and chose to escape. Seeing Xiangmu disappearing into a stream of light, Xianchen also knew very clearly that letting Xiangmu leave safely was undoubtedly letting the tiger return home. Fairy Yaokai suddenly grabbed Suankan's arm and whispered to Xianchen, "The Xiang family has great power in the Tiangong. If you want to survive, you must join our Xianchen section. Join the Star faction." Xianchen didn't expect that at this time, Fairy Yaokai would still want to win over him. Apparently realizing that Xianchen had misunderstood him, Baiki bit his lip lightly, with a hint of pity in his eyes, and continued to explain, "You can save your life by joining our Star section. What if I don't join?" Xianchen frowned slightly. He already had the system. If he wanted to escape, he could activate the system's help. Fairy Yaokai exhaled softly and replied with firm eyes, "If you don't join, I believe that even if you leave this palace, the Xiang family will definitely hunt you down. If you don't believe it, you can give it a try." When Fairy Yaokai saw Xianchen, she did not intend to accept her kindness, and her tone gradually became cold. If it weren't for the good impression Xianchen made on her, She wouldn't have talked too much with such a person regardless of her status. Listening to Fairy Yaokai's explanation, Xian Chen finally took it in. If he relied solely on the system, it would be absolutely possible for him to easily escape from the siege of the Xiang family. But if that were the case, then the people he had interacted with in this life would human beings are destined to end up being unimaginably miserable. I'll go meet the Xiang family for a while. If it doesn't work out then, I'll consider whether to join. Xian Chen did not immediately agree to Fairy Yaokai's invitation. After finding Xiang Mu's aura, he burst out with Dozun momentum and rushed towards the place where Xiang Mu was hiding. Looking at the back of the young man who left, a blush gradually appeared on Fairy Yaokai's cold face. In an extremely majestic hall. Perhaps because of Xiang Mu's exaggeration, the already solemn hall was instantly filled with a faint murderous intent. The middle-aged man in green robe sitting at the head looked at Xiang Mu with a swollen face, hesitated for a moment, and then said quietly to a man in black behind him, "Qi, go and bring back the head of the boy who injured Xiang Mu." Yes, the man in black, codenamed Qi, disappeared from everyone's eyes like a ghost. Just when Xian Chen was looking for Xiang Mu's whereabouts, a faint murderous intention suddenly came from behind Xian Chen. Xian Chen hurriedly got out of the way, but with a sharp sword, he was narrowly avoided by Xian Chen. "Is this the young master Xiang Mu you injured?" The man in black's tone was indifferent, even mixed with a hint of suspicion. But when he suddenly thought of it, a hint of disdain appeared on the face of the man in black. Xian Chen frowned and looked at the visitor. Before he could go to the Xiang mansion to trouble him, the people from the Xiang mansion had already arrived in advance. It had to be said that he still looked like a big family. "That's right, what? Could it be that your Xiang family thinks that you are firmly established in this heavenly palace, so you want to kill innocent people indiscriminately?" Xian Chen sneered indifferently without any hesitation. The man in black's face obviously changed. He immediately slapped a palm towards Xian Chen, and the sharp wind of the palm hit his face, as sharp as a blade. At the moment when the fierce palm wind was about to hit Xian Chen's chest and abdomen, Xian Chen moved half a step sideways, leaning against the man in black and missed it, perfectly dodging it. "What?" The man in black's pupils dilated. "Roar immediately. Splitting wind claw." The man in black roared, and his sharp fingers were like eagle claws, instantly tearing apart the space and stabbing towards Xian Chen. "Court death." Xian Chen gave a soft drink and waved his arm, and the peerless sword that had stabbed Fairy Yaokai was easily grasped in his hand. The man in black had never suffered a loss at Xian Chen's hands. Seeing that the other party was about to wave his sword to resist, the man in black's face became more and more ferocious. "Boy, you are proud enough to die in my hands," the man in black said mockingly, and then just when he thought he was sure to win, a sword that came from nowhere silently penetrated his back and instantly penetrated him. "What?" The man in black's pupils shrank sharply. Just as he was about to escape, he suddenly realized that the surrounding space was imprisoned. It actually made him unable to move at all. Who is it? Relying on his strong cultivation, the man in black did not die on the spot, but waited angrily for the murderer to appear. Looking at this sword with a green blade, Xian Chen couldn't help but think of a certain person. Seeing the man in black who was losing his vitality, Xian Chen didn't even think about it. He clenched the sword in his hand and stabbed the man in black hard between his eyebrows. "The heavenly spirit is damaged, even if Deluo Jingxian comes, there is nothing he can do. Me. I won't give in," the man in black roared, and at this moment, his body suddenly erupted with an extremely terrifying shock wave. Seeing the man in black who chose to self-destruct, Xian Chen was about to burst out his fighting energy to resist, when a pretty figure like a fairy descending from the earth slowly landed in mid-air. The person stretched out his jade hand to cancel out the terrifying explosion, and then turned to look at Xian Chen with a calm expression, his heart filled with complexity. "It's you, Xianchen was a little confused when facing Fairy Yaokai. He and Fairy Yaokai didn't know each other, and they even took advantage of each other. But if you are attracted by the other party just because you accidentally took advantage of him, that would be really funny. What? Can't it be me? I have already told you about the people in this government. They are so numerous that it is impossible for you to resist them all by yourself. This time they are just testing you, so they only arranged for one to come out, but what if they know your strength? How long do you think you can resist? Although Fairy Yaokai sounded a little dissatisfied, her eyes looking at Xianchen were full of worry. Don't worry about me like this, we have nothing to do. Xianchen frowned and spoke, obviously regarding the target of Fairy Yaokai as unnecessary concern. Listening to Xianchen's heartless words, Fairy Yaokai laughed at herself, put the tip of her sword on Xianchen's neck, and said with an indifferent expression, "If it weren't for you suddenly breaking into my world, how could I have treated you like this? You care too much." Seeing Fairy Yaokai exuding terrifying murderous aura, Xianchen didn't realize it until now. If Fairy Yaokai really wanted to kill him, it would only happen in the blink of an eye. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui by Xiong. Chapter 197. Facing Fairy Yaokai's affectionate dialogue, Xianchen, who was in a daze, felt a little at a loss for a moment. The frowning Xianchen took a deep breath, hesitated for a moment, and then said seriously to Fairy Yaokai, "It was not my intention to suddenly break into your world. If the girl feels offended, I'll just leave." Xianchen explained, not caring about the sadness on Fairy Yaokai's face. Faced with this heartless reply, Fairy Yaokai remained silent for a moment, and then erupted with terrifying pressure that could destroy Xianchen. Looking at the young man in front of her, Fairy Yaokai closed her eyes in regret. The long sword in her hand trembled slightly and easily cut a bloody line on Xianchen's neck. The bloodlines gradually became obvious. Feeling blood overflowing from his neck, he faced Fairy Yaokai with a calm expression. Under this emotionless gaze, Fairy Yaokai bit her lips tightly, forcing herself to stabilize her emotions. However, these must be remedial measures. As blood dripped on the ground, Fairy Yaokai retracted her sword, looked at Xianchen with a complicated expression, and said displeasedly, "You obviously have the strength to resist me, why don't you choose to resist? If I resist, it will intensify your hatred of me. Especially in that case, it is better to silently let you slaughter me." This extremely calm tone made Fairy Yaokai furious on the spot. She raised her bare hands and slapped Xianchen hard in the face. This slap made Xianchen look dazed. Even though the blood on his neck was still flowing out, it did not affect Xianchen's indifference at all. However, an unknown amount of time passed, and while the two of them were still at a deadlock, several dangerous auras of extremely powerful momentum were approaching towards the two of them. Under this dangerous aura, Xianchen's expression immediately turned cold, and then he held Fairy Yaokai in his arms. The extremely terrifying momentum continued to approach, shooting out several sharp sword shadows at a speed that was almost visible to the naked eye. These terrifying sword shadows were extremely sharp, almost shooting out at extremely fast speeds. Under this extremely terrifying sword force, Xianchen immediately stepped aside. With his blazing eyes, the terrifying energy erupted from his whole body to resist these extremely sharp sword shadows. Fairy Yaokai's delicate body trembled. She did not expect that at this time, Xianchen would still want to help her resist. However, just when all the sword energy exploded, several strong men with terrifying auras all over their bodies appeared one after another under the gaze of the two men. The eyes of these strong men were cold and cold. One of the leaders, a middle-aged man, looked at the young man holding Fairy Yaokai in his arms. His veins were bulging and he yelled angrily, "This is unreasonable. No matter what, this Fairy Yaokai is not a member of our Xiang family daughter-in-law. When you treat her like this, do you take us into consideration? Snort. Xian Chen snorted coldly, looking at the Xiang family who spoke with an extremely indifferent expression. He raised his long sword and swung it towards the middle-aged man. This sword shadow was extremely arrogant, so arrogant that even the strong man invited by Xiang Mu felt a little numb. He originally thought that Xian Chen was just a being like a cat or a dog, but now that he saw it, it was enough to prove that he was wrong. No. This guy's sword skills are a bit weird. It's very possible that he's pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger. This middle-aged man has the strength of the 7 stars of the fighting saint. With a single movement of his hand, he can cause mountains to collapse, the ground to crack, and space to shatter. But what was destined to make him regretful was that he met Xian Chen. Xian Chen relied on the powerful background of the system to bring the sword energy to its extreme. The power of a sword that can break the sky makes this veteran fighting saint feel numb. He wanted to avoid it, but suddenly discovered that the sword energy seemed to have the ability to lock the space around him. It's over. The middle-aged man said with a pale face, as if he was already about to accept the damage from this sword energy. At the moment when the terrifying sword energy struck, this veteran fighting saint was unwilling to die under this sword, and immediately self-destruct himself in an attempt to open up a space to escape. Boom! Accompanied by the explosion of sword energy. The extremely terrifying sword power immediately harmed the followers behind the middle-aged man. Even though these followers were powerful, the terrifying sword power that could destroy a fighting saint indirectly doomed them to death. The sword energy exploded like a death list, and as expected, all the followers died tragically on the spot. Xian Chen let out a breath of turbid air and said lightly to the shocked fairy Yaokai, "They are all dead. You and I are safe." Xian Chen said calmly to fairy Yaokai, but fairy Yaokai suddenly raised her hand and slapped Xian Chen hard on the cheek. The slap was so hard that Xian Chen looked at fairy Yaokai in confusion. "Why did you hit me?" Xian Chen asked fairy Yaokai. Fairy Yaokai looked at Suankin's red face and said with an unhappy face, "Do you know how dangerous your behavior just now is? It's okay if you kill them all, but if you don't kill them all, what about killing them? Is your life so worthless in your eyes?" When Xian Chen faced Fairy Yaokai's questioning, he had to say that Fairy Yaokai not only had a good appearance, but also had a gentle personality. "I haven't thought about it that much. I just know that if I didn't resist just now, then the girl I like will be bullied." "The girl I like will be bullied? Do you really think so? You know, there are a lot of people who like me in this heavenly palace. Aren't you afraid that those guys will send people out to attack you again?" Fairy Yaokai asked worriedly. Xian Chen was silent for a moment, and then replied with a serious face, "I am not afraid of their revenge. I only know that as long as I can be with you, even if I lose the whole sky, I have no regrets world." "Stop talking." Fairy Yaokai reached out to cover Suankin's lips, but when she noticed that she actually reached out to touch his lips, she quickly and timidly retracted her hand. "I'm sorry, I can't help myself. If possible, I would like to invite you to join the Star faction again, because only in that way will you not be threatened by the Xiang family." Fairy Yaokai looked at Xian Chen. This time, there was no longer the contempt in her eyes, and even her tone was full of doting. "Why do you have to join the Star sect? Could it be that joining the Star sect is good for you?" Xian Chen was puzzled. In terms of his strength, joining such a sect was undoubtedly superfluous. He was used to being free, and suddenly he was asked to join the sect. That is obviously impossible to achieve. Fairy Yaokai's eyelashes trembled slightly, she breathed a long sigh of relief, and continued, "As I said, joining our Star sect is a good thing." Facing Fairy Yaokai's affirmation, Xian Chen hesitated for a moment, looked at the young and beautiful woman in front of him, and then replied seriously, "I can agree to you joining the Star sect, but the premise is that you cannot restrict my freedom." "That's natural. Xin Chen sect will not restrict anyone's freedom." If you are willing to agree to join Xin Chen sect, then I will take you to see the master immediately. After saying this, Fairy Yaokai raised her white jade hand and touched it casually in the empty space. Immediately afterwards, a hole opened in this space under the gaze of the two people. At the invitation of Fairy Yaokai, Xian Chen stretched out his hand to hold the other party. When Fairy Yaokai looked at Xian Chen with a puzzled look, he chose to step forward. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 198. The scene changes. What comes into view is a mansion full of fairy spirit. Looking at this mansion, there were actually two strong men with Dozun standing at the door. However, Xian Chen was shocked on the spot and was scorched on the outside and tender on the inside. The two women seemed to have noticed something, but they noticed Fairy Yaokai standing next to the strange young man. One of the women frowned and looked at Fairy Yaokai and said, "Yaokai, who is this person? Have you forgotten that the master of the palace said that no one can be brought into the inner palace without permission?" After the woman said this, a powerful spiritual force immediately attacked Xian Chen. Xian Chen felt a slight sting on his head and was about to burst out with fighting energy to resist. Fairy Yaokai waved her hand gently, dispersing the spiritual power in an instant. Fairy Yaokai looked displeased and looked deeply at the maid guarding the gate of the mansion. She was silent for a moment before continuing, "It is not the turn of these two seniors to warn me about my work in Yaokai. This entrance is very important, don't stop me." Although Fairy Yaokai's tone was calm, it revealed infinite murderous intent. Under such infinite murderous gaze, the two women looked at each other in silence. After a moment of silence, they worked together to open the closed door. As the door opened, Fairy Yaokai looked back at Xian Chen and motioned for him to follow her. Entering the mansion, following the guidance of Fairy Yaokai, the two came to the main hall with the name Yingban Pavilion written on it. Sitting in the main hall was a woman in red, about 27 or 80 years old. The woman is slender and slim, with her black hair tied casually behind her head, revealing her fair and attractive neck. Her face is extremely delicate, perhaps because of her age, which gives her an extremely elegant taste. Coupled with her excessively fair skin, her face looked a bit dazzling. Yaokai has met Master. Fairy Yaokai bowed her hands respectfully to the woman in red. However, the woman in red's eyes fell on Xian Chen. Seeing that this young man, who only had the strength of Dozun, could actually make his beloved disciple come to see her at the risk of being punished, it really made her beautiful eyes flash with a gleam. "Who is this person? And what's the matter with the injury on your palm?" After thinking for a moment, the woman in red said softly. Facing the inquiry of the woman in red, Fairy Yaokai trembled slightly. She originally thought that her injury would not be discovered by her master, but now it seems that Zhang is still old and spicy. Under the calm gaze of the woman in red, Fairy Yaokai pretended to be aggrieved and explained to the woman in red, "Master, do you still remember that you helped your disciple find a marriage contract? Engagement?" The woman in red frowned slightly. "There is indeed such a thing. Why, are the people in that Xiang mansion making things difficult for you?" Seeing that her beloved disciple looked aggrieved, the woman in red's aura immediately burst out. This strength, which was comparable to the half-emperor realm, made Xian Chen's body tremble. "I thought that the strength of the people in this heavenly palace was empty no matter how high it was, but what this woman showed now was clearly the kind of person who had practiced hard." Thinking of this, Xian Chen secretly decided not to offend her. After glancing at Xian Chen, who was making some small movements, the expression of the woman in red also changed slightly. "Did the people from Xiang Mansion bully you? Tell Master and Master will help you vent your anger." The woman in red continued to ask. Not only did Xian Chen feel admired, but even Yaokai Fairy herself probably didn't expect that her master would say such a thing. Fairy Yaokai followed the trend and ran to the woman in red. Under Xian Chen's confused gaze, she suddenly lay on the woman's lap and started crying. Looking at the charming Yaokai fairy, the woman in red took a deep breath and said consolingly, "Yaokai, have they really bullied you? If so, tell me so that I can help you vent your anger." Returning to Master, he wanted to force the indescribable thing to happen to his disciple based on the fact that he had a marriage contract with his disciple. Fortunately, this young master happened to be passing by and saved his disciple, otherwise, the consequences would be really unimaginable. "Xiang Mu. Did he save you?" Looking at the young man standing in the center of the hall, the woman in red looked slightly surprised. Although Xiang Mu's training was to rely on the secret skills of the heavenly palace to advance to the level of fighting saint, but in her eyes, the young man was just a junior fighting saint, which still made her feel a little weird. This kind of supernatural leapfrog battle made her seriously doubt whether her apprentice was deliberately deceiving her. "Yaokai, although you love your disciple as a master, if you dare to use your feelings as a master to get this kid to join our sect, then I advise you to give up on this idea." The woman in red saw it more clearly, and she immediately guessed Yaokai's thoughts by speaking a word. Yaokai didn't care about this, and continued, "Does this disciple make fun of his chastity? Master, if one of my disciple's words is false, I will never complain no matter how you say it." After Yaokai said that, he stood up on the spot under the blank expression of the woman in red. Seeing Yaokai holding the young man's arm, the woman in red hurriedly stood up, frowned at their backs and said, "Wait, the rules of the star sect still have to be abided by, let him take this jade pendant to practice in the inner section." After saying that, the woman in red ejected a piece of jade pendant. Yaokai held the jade pendant tightly in her hand gratefully, and quickly left the sight of the woman in red with a blank look on her face. After walking out of the mansion, the two maids with Dozun's strength saw Yaokai and the young man walking out of the mansion safe and sound. Although they had doubts, they didn't say a word. Accompanied by Yaokai, the two went to the registration pavilion where Xin Chen sect entered the sect. A burly middle-aged man who was not angry or proud was resting on a recliner. When he heard footsteps in the courtyard, he slowly opened his eyes. When he saw that it was Fairy Yaokai, he hurriedly got up from the recliner, walked quickly to Fairy Yaokai, put his hand on Yaokai's shoulder, and said kindly, "Yaokai, why do you suddenly think of visiting your third uncle at this time, already?" "He, this is the junior brother Xian Chen arranged by Master." While Yaokai introduced Xian Chen beside him, he handed the jade pendant given to him by the woman in red to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man looked at the jade pendant in front of his eyes and looked at it carefully for a few times. With a strange look on his face, he said suspiciously to Yaokai, "Didn't your master say that he won't accept disciples? What's going on?" After the middle-aged man confirmed that the jade pendant was real, the doubts in his heart still lingered. Yaokai blinked her pretty eyes and then explained to the middle-aged man seriously, "Master's original words were for him to join the inner sect, but he did not say that he would be accepted as a disciple." After hearing it clearly, the middle-aged man felt relieved, took a gold medal in charge of registration, frowned at Xian Chen and asked, "Name, place of origin?" "Xian Chen, Wuyutan City." "Xian Chen. Where is Wuyutan City?" The middle-aged man engraved Suankan's name on the gold medal, but when he heard about Wuyutan City, he had a complicated expression. "Dochi continent." Xian Chen touched his nose embarrassedly, and the middle-aged man gave Xian Chen a deep and confused look. "If there are people like you in the lower realm, you must be a rare genius, but if you want to do well in the upper realm, I advise you to practice seriously." The middle-aged man seemed to know something, and after hearing Xian Chen's self-report that he was from Dochi continent, he replied unhurriedly. A moment later, after Xian Chen's name was engraved on the gold medal, the middle-aged man waved his hand lightly on the gold medal. Dots like stars immediately appeared on the surface of the gold medal that was supposed to be flat. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui Bai Xiong. Chapter 199. Inner Disciple Xian Chen. Xian Chen looked at the jade pendant, the corners of his mouth raised slightly, and a trace of amusement flashed in his eyes. With the strength of Dozan, he is the overlord of the entire Doqi continent. But now that he came to this heavenly palace, he was an inner disciple. It has to be said that there are people outside the world and people outside the world. The middle-aged man saw Xian Chen's thoughts, hesitated for a moment, and then frowned at Yao Qi and said, "Did you bring this guy back?" "Yes," Yao Kai replied with a smile, looking at Xian Chen with eyes filled with stars. "Well, I don't know what the other inner disciples will think, but you have to think carefully. If this kid joins the inner sect, it will definitely be a disaster rather than a fortune." The middle-aged man said with a sigh, as if Xian Chen's joining would surely set off a wave of craze in the star sect. However, this cannot be blamed on Xian Chen. Fairy Yaokai's reputation in the Xing Chen sect is already strong, and she naturally has a large number of admiring disciples. Those disciples usually regarded Yaokai as a fairy-like existence, so it was natural that a young man suddenly ran out like this, and he was the young man brought back by Yaokai himself. Naturally, it has a huge impact on those people. Third uncle, don't worry. Since he can be appreciated by the master, he must also have extraordinary abilities. Therefore, I believe that based on his strength, the disciples of the inner sect may not be his opponents. Yaokai did not tell Xian Chen about killing the elites of Xiang Mansion. Otherwise, the reaction of the middle-aged man in front of him would definitely be a look of horror. When the middle-aged man saw Yaokai, he had reached this point. With a warm smile on his face, he walked slowly to Xian Chen. Looking Xian Chen up and down, looking at Xian Chen who was silent, he couldn't help but smile and said, "People who can cultivate to your level in the lower realm are indeed much better than ordinary fighting masters in the upper realm, but don't forget, yes, the gap between realms cannot be resolved by hard work alone. Here is a teleportation talisman. If you encounter trouble, you can try burning it so that you can teleport to this elder. This may provide you with temporary shelter." Although the middle-aged man spoke with a bit of ridicule, he still felt extremely appreciative of this Dozan who came from the lower world. A monk from the lower realm can achieve the strength of Dozan at such a young stage, which is no longer easily comparable to some guys from the upper realm who use secret techniques to forcibly improve their cultivation. Junior thanks Senior Xian Chen naturally chose to accept the middle-aged gift. Firstly, it's because of Yaokai, and secondly, it's because of the other party's care. This kind of backdoor opening is something that many people would never dare to dream about. "Uncle, there's nothing to do. I'll take him on a mission." Yaokai stuck out his tongue playfully, then took Suankan's arm and left with brisk steps outside. Looking at the departing figure, the middle-aged man shook his head speechlessly. It's true that a female college student is not good enough to stay, then why does Yusun want to send his beloved disciple to the Xiang Mansion? Sigh, it's really confusing. The middle-aged man smiled helplessly, so he walked back to the recliner and continued to rest. After Yaokai and Xian Chen left, just when Xian Chen thought that Yaokai would really take him to the inner school, Yaokai suddenly raised his hand lightly and opened up a space crack. When Xian Chen looked confused, Yaokai took Suankan's hand and walked into the space crack. After stepping into the space crack, what came into view was a wide and dilapidated mansion. Not only did half of the building in this courtyard collapse, but even the remaining parts were covered with moss. Xian Chen, who noticed that the dilapidated mansion was still located beside the lake, was puzzled before he had time to ask. Yaokai had already grasped a sharp sword in his hand. Seeing Yaokai's nervous look, Xian Chen gently touched her back, frowned and asked, "What's going on? Why did you bring me here so well? Come and complete the mission." Yaokai's face turned red and he no longer looked directly at Xian Chen. Hearing Yaokai's reply, Xianchen was speechless, but he followed Yaokai's arrangement and silently followed her into the dilapidated courtyard. Looking at this dilapidated mansion, Xianchen was really surprised to come here to complete the mission. "Are you here to hunt some kind of powerful magical beast?" Xianchen murmured to himself, but just a few steps into the courtyard, Xianchen noticed it very clearly. At this moment, there are several eyes exuding murderous intent in the courtyard, staring at them. However, Xianchen didn't take any action when he saw Yao Qi, so Xianchen didn't take those guys hiding in the dark to heart. He, I didn't expect that the famous Yaokai fairy would actually come. I thought that the Yaokai fairy disliked the dirty place and didn't dare to come here. At this moment, an extremely vicissitudes of sound suddenly sounded loudly. At this voice, Yaokai clenched his sword and replied coldly to the owner of the voice, "Yujian, today I, Yaokai, am on a mission within the sect and have come to capture and kill you. Have you thought about how to die?" GGG. The owner of the voice laughed extremely arrogantly, and under the vigilant gazes of the two of them, he penetrated through a wall like a ghost. Looking at this ghost-like old man in black robe, Xianchen narrowed his eyes slightly, his murderous intent revealed, as if he wanted to execute this guy who was neither a human nor a ghost. As the old man took off his black robe, what was revealed next was an old man with white hair who was about 60 years old. Although he is an old man, he is in good spirits. I could feel a faint murderous aura permeating the old man's body. Although the old man still had a smile on his face, but his pair of sharp eagle-like eyes flickered slightly. Looking at the dirty gray robe on his body, there were many spots of blood. Xianchen frowned and asked Yaokai, "This guy named Yujian is not simple, he actually has the strength of the 8 stars of the fighting saint." Looking at this old man with the strength of the 8-star fighting saint, Xianchen rolled his eyes at Yaokai speechlessly. It has to be said that even if a powerful man in this world hits anyone with a stone, he will definitely be able to give himself an unexpected shock. The old man saw that the young man who only had the strength of Dozan dared to ridicule him, so he pretended to be profound and mocked, "What? Is it that your Xin Chen sect looks down on the little old man, or is it that you, fairy Yaokai, are too arrogant? You think you can lead a mere Dozan, can we kill the little old man together?" The old man said mockingly, and as soon as he finished speaking, several black shadows appeared behind him. Each of these people has a good level of cultivation, and among them there are many beings of a level similar to Yaokai. And the opponent with the worst strength is only a 5-star Dozan. Looking at Xianchen, who was the junior Dozan, and Yao Qi, who was at the middle level, they couldn't help but laugh. Obviously, they really didn't take young people like Yaokai and Xianchen seriously. "Yuan, do you know what kind of price you have to pay for saying such words?" Fairy Yaokai said coldly. With a move of her hand, the sword she held tightly was already pointing towards the victim. The old man called it Yujianzhou and stabbed it quickly. The Strongest Husband of Dopo. Author, Hui by Xiong. Chapter 200. Snort. Looking at Fairy Yaokai's attack, it was obvious that Yujian had expected it. Yujian didn't move at all, he just raised his fingers and squeezed lightly, and then easily caught the sharp sword tip pierced by Yaokai between his fingers. Yaokai's brows trembled slightly. Although she knew in advance that Yujian's strength was not comparable to those of the disciples who were always in Wenqi. But what she never expected was that the ability to jump 1,000 yuan would be so high. You know, Fairy Yaokai used a full 100% of her strength just now to kill Yujian with one sword. However, what Yaokai Fairy didn't expect was that his 10 success powers would be easily resisted by the 1,000 yuan leap. Tisk, tisk, such a beautiful beauty, it would be such a wonderful thing to be able to hold her in my arms while sleeping at night. Haha, looking at you like this, don't forget that they are from the Xin Chen section. If you don't want to die in an ugly way, I advise you to accept this idea. Haha, What happened to the Xin Chen sect? I am fighting the Xin Chen sect. Those who had the strength to fight for saints spoke one after another. Just as these people finished speaking, Xian Chen, who was standing not far behind Yaokai, suddenly moved. He was seen holding a long sword in his hand. Just as those people had expressions of contempt on their faces, the tip of an extremely sharp sword pierced the chest of a young man wearing a black robe almost extremely quickly. What? This young man in his early 30s looked shocked. I'm afraid he never thought that his 3-star fighting saint's strength would be easily killed by a young man of about 20 or so who only had the strength of a junior fighting saint. No. This kid is actually hiding his strength. Pretend to be a pig and eat the tiger. Damn it. I almost let this kid deceive me. Don't take it lightly. This kind of person is the most disgusting kind. No wonder Fairy Yaokai brought him here. It turns out he is a hidden master. From the Star Sect. No matter how powerful you are, I don't believe you can still kill us all. A bunch of trash. Yu Qianyuan looked at those guys who were already in a hurry, but he complained fiercely in his heart. Not good. Just when Yu Qianzhou lost his mind, a sharp sword fell from his neck in an instant. Even though Yu Qianyuan made many dangerous attempts to avoid it, there was still a clearly visible blood mark cut by the sharp sword. Yu Qianyuan swallowed a mouthful of spit, looked at Fairy Yaokai with a vigilant expression, hesitated for a moment, and then said apologetically, Fairy Yaokai, although you and I are not the same people, in the final analysis, logically speaking, according to seniority, you should also call me senior. As the saying goes, there are first waves and then there are back waves. Why do we need to kill them all? Why don't I suffer a loss, little old man? How about accepting you as my goddaughter? At this time, Yu Qianyuan still wanted to take advantage of Fairy Yaokai, but Fairy Yaokai was so angry that she was shaking all over. Fairy Yaokai shouted angrily, it can be said that her strength exploded to the extreme. Obviously she was really prepared to kill this guy who blasphemed her on the spot. As a faint murderous intention appeared on the scene, immediately behind the Yu Qianyuan, an extremely cold illusion was instantly felt. Yu Qianyuan hurriedly turned around and looked back nervously, when he saw that the person who attacked him turned out to be the Dozan young man whom he looked down upon at all. He was furious and immediately raised his palms to resist. Just when Yu Qianyuan thought he was 100% successful in resisting, an accident suddenly happened. With Yu Qianyuan's ferocious expression on his face, and seeing his palm being pierced through, Yu Qianyuan instantly realized something. He looked at the young man in disbelief, and then at the body of the follower lying on the ground, and jumped $1,000 hatefully to avoid it like crazy. Only seeing his palm split into two, Yu Qianyuan almost screamed in pain. Yaokai Fairy seized the opportunity and stabbed Yu Qianyuan hard in the waist. Yu Qianyuan, who was already injured, was no match for Fairy Yaokai. He immediately broke through the space and tried to escape, but was forcefully grabbed by a hand and thrown to the ground. Yu Qianyuan rolled around a few times and looked at Xian Chen and the two with a disgraced look. He still had the master look in front of him. The two of them were almost so angry that they were trembling slightly. Looking at Xian Chen's indifferent temperament, the corners of his eyes twitched in shock. You, don't bully others too much. Yu Qianyuan gritted his teeth angrily. The latter, Xian Chen, stepped in front of Yu Qianyuan. Looking at Yu Qianyuan, who was sitting on the ground with a disgraced face, Suankan's mouth showed a dangerous arc, and he said sarcastically, now that your hands are disabled, how can you still hurt me? Boom. Often the best way to kill an enemy is the simplest attack. Xian Chen raised his foot and kicked Yu Qianyuan hard in the abdomen. Almost instantly, Yu Qianyuan's heart was kicked to pieces on the spot. But often such strong people can separate their soul bodies and escape, so Xian Chen immediately pinched the neck of Yu Qianyuan's soul body and said arrogantly, weren't you very powerful before? Why are you like this now? What's that like? Are you continuing to be arrogant with me? Facing Suankin's ridicule, Yu Jianyuan only felt his cheeks burning with pain. However, he has no way to do it. Now only Yu Qianyuan's soul body is left. Even his body is no match for Xian Chen. How could this soul body be? Who are you? Why are you so powerful? Yu Qianyuan's roaring tone made Xian Chen feel extremely comfortable. Looking at Yao Kai's side, Xian Chen showed a smile on his face and said lightly, "This old man has blasphemed you in front of you, so you can deal with it how you want." Fairy Yao Kai stood there with a messy face, looking at Xian Chen with a relaxed face. She just felt that he was a monster. "Bring him back to the section. The reward you receive this way may be much higher," Yao Kai replied calmly, and then took out an exquisite sphere. Looking at the panicked Yu Jianyuan, Yao Kai said lightly, "Yu Jianyuan, I didn't expect that you would be able to be where you are today after being domineering for 200 years, right? Ah, even if it means death. I will never let you take it back." Yu Jianyuan roared, almost wanting to choose to self-destruct to escape the restraints in Suankin's hands. But since Xian Chen is holding it tightly in his hand, how can it be possible for him to complete it easily? A purple gold flame emerged from the palm of his hand. The true purity of this flame was not comparable to those of the strange fires in Dochi continent. Under the burning of this purple gold flame, Yu Jianyuan, who was wailing incessantly, would eventually be so painful that he fainted and died on the spot. After putting Yu Qianyuan's soul into the ball, Yao Kai looked at Xian Chen with an expression that looked like a monster. "How do you look like Dozan? You are just like the terrifying existence of Master." Fairy Yao Kai said with a speechless face. Xian Chen heard this, touched his nose and asked inquiringly, "Your master respect her, what kind of cultivation is she?" 50 years ago, it seemed like a half-emperor, I don't know now, she didn't tell me either." "Well." Xian Chen listened to Yao Kai's reply with a confused look on his face, and then he hurriedly checked his template after realizing it. But after seeing that his cultivation level was indeed only that of a junior Dozan, he broke out in a cold sweat. He even had some doubts as to whether his cheating speed was really too exaggerated.